Well, I'm running for treasurer because I'm the only candidate in this race who I think has a financial experience to come in and reform the office the way it needs to be reformed so we can focus on its critical missions, its main mission of investing our state's resources. I'm a former county auditor, certified public finance officer. In my time in the Senate, I've served on the Financial Institutions Committee. I served on pensions and investments. And I'm a co-chair of the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. These are a lot of where my interest and focus has been on financial issues. I think my opponent, on the other hand, is an attorney. And, I think if the only tool in your tool belt is a hammer, then you view all problems as nails. I don't think we can solve our problems by suing our way into prosperity. Now, so I think what we need to do is we need to come in and we actually need to, on day one, conduct an audit of this office to identify problems in there, inefficiencies, wasteful spending, where politics has crept a little too far into the office. I think the media has done a good job of identifying some of those obvious places for us. So we'll come in and we'll fix those things. I think recent scandals have shown there are definite problems in that office. And the treasurer himself brought in a company to come in and review the office. And I think it cost the state something like $17 million. Promised to release that to the public.
17 million?
It was expensive.
Not million.
Maybe it wasn't million. How much was it?
Can't be million.
1.7. I think I'd probably move my decimal point. 1.7 million. I was off a decimal point, which is a big difference. And promised to make that public to the people. I think it should be public. It's paid for with their tax dollars, and if we want to regain trust in people, rebuild trust, we should make that public. And then we should focus on what the office actually does and how to do it more efficiently. I think that I've identified over the course of this campaign various things we're going to do to update current programs the Treasurer's Office is already doing and to do them better. I don't think what we need to do is have a big expansion of this office. I think other candidates out there are talking about hiring new attorneys, producing new reports, prosecuting people. Those aren't the responsibilities of the Treasurer's Office. And just to sort of sum up, I think I'm the only candidate in this race who has the experience in public finance to come in and run the office as the way it should be run.
Mr. Cross, when he was here, I think he said he would try to do it, whatever he wants to do with existing level of people there, so he would have this kind of public integrity unit. What's wrong? I think you just indicated there's something wrong with that. What's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, if you want to sue people, you should run for Attorney General. And I think Mr. Cross, for a greater part of last year, ran around the Capitol and ran around the state telling people he wanted to be the state's next Attorney General. And I think it's become obvious when he talks about hiring attorneys to prosecute elected officials and talks about suing the General Assembly, that's still where his mindset is. Those aren't the responsibilities of the state treasurer. I mean, it's not a bad platform to run for Attorney General. For state treasurer, it just shows a lack of understanding of how the office runs. Now, he says he wants to do it without staying within the budget of the treasurer. If you're going to come in, you're going to hire a bunch of attorneys who aren't currently working in that office. We can say that government attorneys might work cheaper than corporate attorneys, but they're not cheap. If you're talking about producing reports that the office hasn't produced before, I think you're going to bring on new people there. And my point is, you can't run as a fiscal conservative. You can't say we need to rein in spending and reduce the size of state government, and then go out and every proposal you make, expand the responsibilities of your office. It requires new hiring and new spending. My proposals have focused on things like taking our current programs with linked deposit accounts, like Ag Invest, and updating them. It doesn't require new dollars. It requires using our old programs more efficiently. When we talk about making greater use of the TDA accounts, the technology development accounts, it's a program that's already there. We have a board of advisors that are unpaid, which say we want to make greater use of our funds to invest in Illinois-based venture capital. These aren't necessarily sexy things. But quite frankly, I think it's probably time we have a treasurer who is a bit more on the dull side, who isn't looking to use the office as a stepping stone. Our last 3 treasurers have used the office to run for higher office. I think the last 2, after one term, turned almost immediately around and started running for another office. This is the office I want to do. This is also, if the voters choose me for, I intend to run for re-election for. So I think there's a big difference. If you want someone who's going to use the office as a political stepping stone to promote themselves, there's a big difference, and you probably shouldn't be supporting me.
So you're saying you'd never run for governor or lieutenant governor? Or?
I wouldn't say I'm never running for anything else, but this is the office I want to run for. I'm going to come in, we're going to clean up the office, we're going to remove some of the politics in the office, and we're going to do a good job making investments in the state to help grow our economy. And if we do that, I intend to run for re-election as state treasurer, touting the accomplishments as treasurer.
The current treasurer has, what was the number? Was it 50 interns
50.
overtime? Or at one time?
It is, well, what you'll see is compared to other constitutional offices, it's a far greater number. Compared to previous treasurers, it's a far greater number. And if you look at the pattern, there was an increasing number of interns every year until this summer after the Republican primary, when it fell back off again. There's a clear pattern that this was a program used to hire children and friends of politically connected people and donors.
So what's
And so I think they were hired to go out and help promote a candidacy for governor. And that's wrong. My opponent says the current treasurer is doing a great job. So he's doing a wonderful job in the treasurer's office. I disagree. I think we can do a better job.
I think you pointed out some problems too, but I think.
He has, at least on record, 3 times said he's doing a great job, he's doing a good job, he thinks he's doing a good job.
Okay, what is the right number of interns for an office? And by the way, how many employees does it have, and would that stay about the same?
So the number of employees move, but fluctuates somewhere around 160 or so employees, 51 of which, I believe, are devoted towards iCash. Now, that's a program with merit. That's one of the responsibilities of the Treasurer's Office, to help return unclaimed property to people in the state. I think there are ways we can do it more efficiently. It doesn't have to become a self-promotion tool for a treasurer, an excuse to go out and run around the campaign and tie it to fundraisers and political events. I think we can make better use of our online marketing, online resources, and partnering with communities out there. You don't have to have such a great percentage of the budget dedicated to that.
So I know that Treasurer Rutherford says when the treasurer comes to town and you say he's there, it raises the profile of the program. People look online or whatever, they look more and get their money back through iCash.
Yeah, I know the treasurer said that. And the treasurer has also said that they would use these iCash visits as an anchor around political activities. And
so would you not travel at all to do this, or what would you?
The treasurer does travel around the state, but I think if you look at how this office has been run and the number of interns that have been hired and the amount of staff dedicated, this clearly was tied to a political campaign for governor. And that's why we're coming on day one, and we're going to have outside auditors come in and show how we can run this office more efficiently, to run with greater business practices, and to remove politics.
Did you say, by the way, what a good number of interns would be?
I think you look at the other offices out there. I mean, I believe it's the Attorney General's office. They have 0 paid interns. You know, they have interns who are doing this for the experience, for something to put on their resume. I mean, so that the ideal number would be significantly less than 50-some. And I think, you know, we could offer opportunities for college credit and get people to come in and intern and save taxpayer dollars.
So you're saying you believe in unpaid work?
I believe there are lots of college students out there looking to get experience in government to get their start.
You've talked about investments a little bit. Can you elaborate more on how's the state doing with that? What would you change? How would you improve?
Sure. I'll tell you what I would change, and I'll tell you how those things have been mischaracterized by my opponent's campaign. We need to have a diversified portfolio. We need to make sure that we're making safe investments, that we're not putting all of our money at risk. But I also think at the same time, we can make a greater emphasis on growing our economy here in this state. And so a couple of examples. One is the technology development accounts. You know, we started this several years ago, allowed the state to put up to 1% of our state assets in Illinois-based venture capital. You know, you get historically a much higher rate of return than other state investments, but you do carry more risk than those investments. We said 1% is a safe amount. Well, it was a good program. We invested, and those venture capital firms invested and helped grow more companies here in this state. Not exclusively, but they did help grow jobs here. So that about 4 years ago, I was happy to support, and our current treasurer had said, this is a good economic development tool. But then once given that tool, the current treasurer never used TDA2. I think we can make greater use, make greater investment here in our state. That's one way we can make greater investment. It's not all of our resources, but using all the tools in our tool belt. The other is through linked deposits. This is something that's been going on for over 20 years in the state of Illinois. We have a great program that's been beneficial for downstate Illinois with the Ag Invest program. And I think since 1983, it's been over $1 billion in investment in Illinois agriculture. Illinois agriculture is the largest total industry in the state of Illinois. I think it's a worthwhile program. Now, what I've said, though, is as agriculture changes, and more farmers are making that switch to sustainable agriculture, things that Caterpillar and John Deere are doing and recognizing. They recognize and do this. They're making changes in their investments to make tractors run more efficiently, put out less carbon, use less fuel. But those transitions from the way we've done things to how we would like to do them are expensive. And I think the state can help those farmers make that transition. And if we do that, you help the farmers, you help our industries that sell them a lot of their machinery, and you help the environment. It seems like a smart investment. We're not going out and creating brand new things. What we want to do is take the things the state is doing and to do them smarter.
Some of the programs, we talked about this last week too, the Bright Start, Bright Directions, and you said you wanted the bid for the servicer of those programs needs to go back out because Oppenheimer is not doing well. What are they not doing well?
Well,
the fees were too high.
Sure. So there are a variety of things. You saw several years ago, Oppenheimer was putting a lot of these subprime repackaged mortgages into families' college savings accounts. Now, at the same time, they were selling off their own similar securities. And what that resulted in is for too many families in the state, losses of tens of thousands of dollars that they were saving and counting on for their kids' college education. Now, we reached a settlement with them about 5 years ago, but it was about 50 cents on the dollar. So that right there was one problem. Two, Oppenheimer has been found to be under investigation by the SEC since then for various problems. And then if you also look at the fees they're charging Illinois families versus in surrounding states, I just think they're too high. So their contract was up this year. I called on the current treasurer to put that out for bid. He had an option of putting out for bid or of giving them an extension. He chose to go with the extension. I would say it's funny to me that when you have a party that talks so much about the benefits of the free market and how competition really sort of spurs improvements, that the current treasurer decided not to use competition here, not to use the free market to lower fees for families, and to find someone who might be a better fiduciary for the people in the state. And once again, my opponent says the current guy is doing a great job. We think we can do better, and we think we should.
Is there a firm out there that you think would do better, or this is one sort of emerged as
No, this is not about the treasurer picking someone else. When the treasurer wants to come in and say, I'm going to give this to certain firms in advance, you run into all kinds of problems. What we want to do is to have a competitive bidding process. Put it out there. It is an awful lot of money to manage, and there will be plenty of companies out there that will want a shot at this. And if we give them that shot, they'll come to us. We'll have an opportunity, not just me, but a broad group of people looking at this, to find the best provider for the families of the state of Illinois.
Where are you on the merger of the offices of controller and treasurer?
I've been supportive of it, and I've said I voted to support or to let the public vote on this. Now, what I also said in one radio interview, and because I see you have my opponent's press release out there,
yes.
he likes to say they flip-flopped. What I've said is we need to be smart about how we're doing it. We need to make sure that there are proper internal controls in place and there are proper checks and balances. But if we do that, we can find savings. I'm convinced of it. But what I also am convinced of is we can find savings without merging the offices. We might find more if we do that, but we're not going to be able to merge those offices until the earliest 2018.
Because it's constitutional.
Yeah, because it requires a constitutional amendment. And so what can the treasurer do? Can the treasurer work with whomever is elected comptroller, and that's something I pledged to do, to find ways where the two offices can work together through agreements between the two offices, to perhaps share staff that can be doing the jobs in both offices. And if we do that, we can start saving money today. The way we're going to start saving money is by being creative and eliminating redundancies between parts of state government. finding places to be more efficient. You know, I've looked at the comptroller's office and said, how can we share resources? How can we share employee responsibilities in a way that saves us money? My opponent, this proposals out there, has said that he wants to start issuing financial reports from the treasurer's office on state spending. Quarterly, which I think is already done by the state comptroller. Judy Partopinka already issues quarterly financial reports and monthly financial reports. So does he want to go out and hire new people to duplicate the work done by the comptroller? He says he wants to hire attorneys to go out and prosecute elected officials and to sue the General Assembly. Well, our Attorney General already has attorneys for that. You know, what I've been trying to do is say, how can we run this office more efficiently? The alternate version is saying, how can we grow this office? I think that's the wrong direction.
I think the 1970 Constitution created both offices because of the Orville Hodge scandal, auditor of public accounts who was stealing money. So, and when Mr. Cross was here, he talked about what's wrong with more information, you know, and let's say that you and the comptroller end up being of different parties, would not, isn't it kind of a check and balance to put out different reports so that you can look at the numbers? Because you might reach different conclusions, don't you think?
Well, I think that I will work with whomever is elected comptroller, Democrat or Republican. My opponent's saying that we need to issue more reports. Well, then, okay, where do you stop? The General Assembly should issue more reports. The governor's office should issue more reports. At some point, we have to be able to live within our means. And he'll say, on the one hand, that he supports balanced budgets, but then when it comes to his own budget, he wants to increase spending. I just think they're contradictory. They're two worthwhile goals, but they're contradictory.
Again, I think he says he'd do it within budget, but you don't believe that, is what you're saying.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe you can go out and hire a bunch of attorneys and then take on new responsibilities and hire new people there and then do it within budget. And also say that the current treasurer is doing a great job. I've not heard any criticism from the Cross campaign about Rutherford and where he is spending too much or where he thinks he's doing a bad job. Every radio interview we've heard, he said he's doing a good job.
What about the general state budget? The Democratic Party has been in control for a number of years. And remind me, did you vote for the extension of the tax?
Extension?
The 5%?
No one voted for that.
No, I mean, well, not the extension. Did you vote for the
original one?
The
Yes.
one.
The original
and
one.
have you a position on what should happen to it now?
Yeah. I voted for it because it was clear the state needed the revenue to avoid drastic cuts towards education, towards public safety, and to our infrastructure. It needed to be done. We had huge deficits, but I voted to make it temporary. And the idea was that we'd be able to pay down our backlog of bills. We've not paid them down completely, but we've paid down that backlog significantly. And at the end of that time, we need to look at a way to right-size state government, make sure our spending was efficient, and to raise revenues in a way that makes Illinois competitive and fair. And so I look forward to having a discussion going forward about the best way to do that, but I don't think the answer is to just come in veto session and extend what we've been doing. Because what I've talked about a lot in this treasurer's campaign is we can't just look at the old way of doing things and continue them. We need to be creative and we need to be smarter about how we're doing providing the services we provide.
Well, when Mr. Cross was here, we asked him if he had kind of examined Roner's budget plan, and he said he hadn't really.
Yes.
You have, the governor of your party, who I assume you support, is for an extension of the tax, if not veto, maybe in the lame duck session in January. Mm-hmm. You're saying you don't support the governor in what he wants to do in that?
I don't support the extension of this income tax as is. Well, I think we need to let that expire, and we need to look at ways to right-size state government and to raise revenues in a way that it is fair and makes us more competitive.
And do you know what form that should take as the prospective chief financial officer of the state?
Well, the state treasurer is the chief investment officer of the state of Illinois. In other states, it'll be their chief financial officer. We have multiple financial officers in the state of Illinois. So, but what I would say is my opponent says throughout the campaign, the number one focus is to have balanced budgets. First off, balancing your budgets is responsibility of the General Assembly. And so I think if that's your number one responsibility or priority, you probably should run for re-election. Two, he says he's going to sue the General Assembly, even though there is no constitutional authority for the treasurer to sue. It makes no sense. But three, if you take him at his word that this really is a high priority and that it's fundamental for the state, then he ought to have some opinion on Bruce Rauner's budget. It doesn't take that long to read through it. And it also doesn't take that long to read through numerous economists, political scientists, and journalists who have all looked at this budget and pronounced it is horribly out of balance. You can't claim to be a watchdog for the state. You can't claim to be focused on a balanced budget and then have no thoughts on this clearly unbalanced budget the head of your state party. You can't call yourself a watchdog and be a lapdog protecting your own party.
Well, members of your party, including the governor, keep saying you'll blow a giant hole in the budget and devastate education and other things if you don't extend the tax. You're saying don't extend the tax. So what are the alternatives? Is it a progressive income tax, which couldn't take effect without a constitutional amendment anyway, or is it expansion of sales taxes to services, or do you have you're also not accepting the dire consequences that members of your own party are saying will occur if you do if you don't do what the government wants?
I'm not saying we can't have any new revenue. Even Bruce Rauner and Judy Bart Topinka have said you can't let the tax go away completely overnight. I mean, they've even said we need to scale us down. And so I'm not ruling out any new revenue, but I'm saying we made a promise to sunset this. Now we should come back together and we should be creative and we should work together to find some way that allows us to properly fund our key priorities in the state, while at the same time making Illinois more competitive with our neighboring states.
So that word, right size, that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Could you elaborate some on that?
Yeah. So I think our key responsibilities in the state are funding our education. We need to be able to maintain our infrastructure because I think it's important for job creation in the state. We need to make sure we have public safety. So what the treasurer can do is look to right size the treasurer's office. And I think when you have nearly a third of the employees involved in iCash and you have $300,000 spent on interns that I think aren't necessarily necessary, we need to learn to start living within our means rather than taking on new responsibilities. And so that's where I think the treasurer can play a role.
Right. Are there other agencies, though, that are, from your point of view, just grossly overstaffed? Or, I mean, it seems like they've just been cut after cut after cut over the last several years.
Yeah, there's been significant cuts in state government. I mean, Illinois has one of the lowest per capita state employee rates in the country. But I think there are areas that there was a lot of consolidation, perhaps in CMS, that I haven't necessarily seen the great results that were promised there. And that's one place to look as well.
Any thoughts about the lottery and rebidding, all of that, the job of the current provider?
Sure. Well, I think that the current provider has lost their contracts, and I think that will probably need to go back out for bid if the state wants to, in general, somebody wants to go in that direction.
Could you talk a bit about this property tax issue that has rolled around? It's been resolved, yes? Is that
Yeah.
okay.
The Department of Revenue
What happened?
issued a legal ruling that I never owed that the state of Illinois does not pay property taxes on its buildings. And so my office, as a branch of state government, was not liable for property taxes. And quite frankly, we had a conversation. Department of Revenue originally ruled that we owed this because they thought the office was a campaign office. When we clarified that no, this was official state business, they issued an opinion that no, we didn't owe it. And so I paid all of my personal property taxes. I paid the taxes that I owe. Now, my opponent, who was trying to make a big issue of this, was late in paying his personal property taxes. You know, he's not paying property taxes out of the state for his district office. You know, when presented with a bill, the Secretary of State said the state doesn't pay property taxes. We're not going to pay that. But it became a big issue, and so we paid it ourselves just so we can move on and start talking about real issues in this race. You know, this is a distraction. You know, if you don't have a record you want to run on, then you run a campaign purely based on negative attacks. And so that's, my opponent keeps talking about this, about not paying property taxes. Not paying taxes I didn't know. I don't think there are many people out there who like paying taxes, but we really especially hate paying taxes that we don't owe. And you saw that when people got parking tickets in the city of Chicago when they hadn't visited Chicago. I mean, nothing drives people more, makes them angrier than getting charged something they don't owe. But what we're trying to do in this campaign is to talk about the responsibility of the Treasurer's Office. And my opponent, who doesn't seem to understand the responsibility of the Treasurer's Office, is trying to talk about other things.
Your legislative office is in what building? is it a school district building or?
No, it's in the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District building.
Mass Transit District building, and so it was Department of Revenue that ultimately decided that it's not taxable because it's state business.
Yeah, because it's a state business. It's my district office.
Okay, I mean, I was surprised. I did see the press release. You're using your clout with Quinn's administration and the Department of Revenue to get this changed. Your just thoughts about that? Because I'm not exactly sure how that works.
I'm not sure, other than another partisan attack, I'm not sure how it works. My opponent is an attorney, and that's why he wants to sue. A lot of people wants to be attorney general. Yet he won't take the time to read a legal opinion about the state's property taxes. It's clear to every lawyer out there. I guess it's easier to lob charges of clout, but if he really thinks that it's clout-based, then he should issue a legal opinion as to why the state owes property taxes.
Where is your campaign office?
My campaign office is in the same building. That's the confusion.
Oh, okay.
So on the campaign office, we do owe property taxes. We've paid all of those property taxes. In the district office, we do not.
And you said you did go ahead and you paid the taxes.
Yeah.
Did you get a refund yet?
We pay them. We're not seeking a refund. I don't know what the status is going to be. We're running for state treasurer. We're not running for chief supervisor of assessments. We're not running for attorney general. What we want to be talking about in this campaign is the way we're going to make investments to help grow the middle class in the state.
So, how many employees does the treasurer's office have in Springfield versus Chicago, and is that about the right mix?
Is it the right mix? Yeah. We think it is.
Is there like 50 here and 100 there, 100 here, 50 there?
I believe we have more here than we have in Chicago, but I have not looked that closely as the mix, but the mix seems right to me.
We spoke about pensions, and I proposed, okay, if it's looking like the reform or the overhaul that was passed last year is going to get thrown out, that, you said you'd be willing to work with public employees to find a solution.
Hmm?
When I said, okay, a 401k style, and you said, well, there wouldn't be any real savings there, they would have to pay Social Security. Can you kind of rehash over that or explain?
So with a lot of these employees, the state is not paying Social Security taxes. And we're able to do that because when these pensions were created, you opt out of Social Security because we're providing with a defined benefit. If you don't provide them a defined benefit, then federal government, IRS, can come in and say, they need something, you're going to have Social Security. And Social Security, the state would require to pay about 6.25% of their salary. And my opponent, who said we need to switch over to 401k, they need to make a contribution to their 401k. If you're going to make a modest contribution of 3% of salary, on top of the contribution you're paying in Social Security, you're looking at 9.25%, 9.5% of their salary. And that's about what the standard cost for our pension is. Now, we're paying greater because of years of underfunding of the system. And these are things that my opponent has supported in the past. That pension ramp they passed in 1995, although a good idea and well-intentioned, was underfunding for the first several years of that ramp. It helped get us in the position we are now. So an awful lot of the expense the state has right now is because previous General Assemblies did not do their job, didn't make their proper payments.
What idea, how would you approach these employees when you're trying to find a solution then? If the system that we're operating under now doesn't work, if the overhaul doesn't pass, there's something in the middle that needs to be done. What ideas would you have for them?
Well, we're going to have to get some guidance from the state Supreme Court. I think it's fairly clear they ruled that the health care benefits are protected, that they're going to strike down all or large portions of Senate Bill 1 that we passed. Now, my guess is that they're also going to issue in that ruling some guidelines about what would be constitutional. And they may not strike all parts of it down. And so what I've said is we need to come together with people who have a stake in this and say, how can we help bring down our large unfunded liability? And I've talked to lots of groups representing these employees. And what they've told me is we want to be part of the solution. We don't want to be the entire solution. We want to be part of it. We live in this state. We get it. We need to make sure we're also funding our schools. And so I think when the Supreme Court gives us some guidelines about what is constitutional, that's the direction I think we should go. Now, but I think we should be very cognizant of what is constitutional. My opponent was leading the effort on pension reform for a while. He was leading the effort up until the point where he decided that it just didn't go far enough and changed his mind to be in line with his party's standard bearer for governor. Now, when asked, he'll tell you he's an attorney. Told you before that he thought this was constitutional. When asked over the course of this campaign, said, well, I don't know. The courts will rule it out. I mean, I don't see how you can take your oath of office to uphold the state constitution and then say I'm taking action, and I have no idea if it's constitutional or not. It doesn't matter to me.
Which way did you vote on the pension plan that's before the Supreme Court?
I voted no.
You voted no, and that was because?
I thought it was unconstitutional. And I think with the recent ruling on health care, I think we have a pretty good idea that they're going to rule that way.
Are you at the end of your Senate term or in the middle of one?
I'm in the middle of my
You
Senate
have
term.
a 4-year term.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And who did you defeat, or how did you get to the Senate? How many years ago was that, and who did you run against to get there?
In 2006, I ran against Judy Myers, a former state senator.
Pat Quinn, if you look at various polls, and I don't know if you can believe them, is not the most popular in certain areas downstate. So, and then Bruce Runner is a new face, and there's lots of commercials going back and forth. Just politically
There are
speaking,
lots of commercials.
How are you identifying yourself as a Quinn ally downstate, and how is that? Just politically speaking, how is the Democratic ticket doing downstate? How is that helping you in our territory, or hurting you?
Well, we're not spending an awful lot of time looking at polls. We don't have the millions of dollars the gubernatorial candidates have to run continuous polls. What we have is shoe leather and actually a lot of rubber tires in our cars. We're traveling all up and down the state talking with people. And I feel pretty good that when we go out with our message of coming in and cleaning up the office, that we're the only candidate with the experience to come in and clean up the office and make investments that will help grow the middle class, we've been very well received. The election is not today. We have another 5 weeks to go out and to work at this. We feel very confident that we get out there in front of them with this message, we'll be successful.
If in the choice for governor, can you say who you're for and why?
Oh, I've said before, I support the Democratic ticket. I think that Bruce Rauner is, the vision he has outlined, will be detrimental to the state.
I realize this doesn't fall under treasurer's duties, but I was curious on the school funding reform effort, what your thoughts are on that. If that's something you support your downstate lawmaker.
Yeah, I supported Senator Menard's bill, not because it was a perfect bill, but because it's clear something needs to be done. We need to push the ball forward. When I first ran, I campaigned on the need to change the way education is funded in this state. We have some of the greatest inequalities between our school districts of any state in the country. It's good because on the one hand, we have school districts that are spending an awful lot of money per student, producing some really good students, have really good teachers and good schools, but we also have some that just are nowhere near the amount of resources there. And I just think that it is a big problem for the state that the quality of the education you receive, the opportunity you have going forward, is determined in such large measure on the address you're born at, what street you're born. I just think that's a civil rights issue out there, that we need to work to decrease some of those inequalities. Because the state can't guarantee equal outcomes for everyone. No one's suggesting that. But kids born, no fault of their own, ought to have equal opportunities.
Is there anything in the bill that you thought might be a problem or anything that you didn't like as it is?
Sure.
Anything that concerns you?
There have been very few bills that have gone to the General Assembly that I agree with 100%. However, in this case, it was clear we need to move the ball forward. And it was understood on the floor that there were things that would be fixed or tweaked in the House, but that we needed to get this conversation going forward because for decades we have talked about decreasing some of these inequalities. We've talked about lifting up some of our poorer school districts in the state, and very little has been done. And so I think what Senator Menard is doing is pushing us in the right direction.
When we visited with him a week or so ago, he really pointed out the difference in his mind between the equity and the adequacy, and that he's really trying to focus on the equity. He realizes, as we all do, that adequacy is a problem, but we need first of all to resolve the equity portion of that. Where do you fall on that, on those two choices?
Well, I guess I want to congratulate and commend my colleague, Senator Menard, for the work he has done here. we represent similar districts. You know, I've got Champaign-Urbana on one half of my district, Danville on the other. Champaign-Urbana, which has a large number of state employees or pensioners to the university, and Danville, a former factory industrial town that has seen some hard times. In his district, he's got Springfield on one end, home to state government, and Decatur on the other, sort of similar to Danville, that has had tough times, experienced tough times, with a lot of agricultural area in between. Our districts are very similar. I think we have a very similar approach to how we fix some of our problems in the state. And so I would say I would agree with Senator Menard.
One of those tweaks that may come about, we don't know yet, but there was talk of a hold harmless clause, kind of easing districts as they sort of converge. People begin to lose, people would begin to gain, but more slowly than the bill than if you just passed it right away. Where would you, do you support that?
Oh yeah, I think if you want to be politically practical and get something passed, we need change in the state, but if you produce too great of change, it produces shocks for certain people. And so even though we have some school districts that are very high, we don't necessarily want to penalize them, but we need to decrease some of those inequalities.
What about pension cost shift being a part of that discussion? There seems to be some concerns among Republican senators, at least, that somehow the cost shift discussion might end up attached to the school funding reform. Do you have concerns about that? Do you think those two things have to happen at the same time? Should they be separate?
I have concerns about the cost shift. I don't want the state's lack of funding for years just be dumped on local school districts. So yes, I have concerns, but I haven't seen a specific proposal out there.
Is Illinois ever going to provide a predominant amount of the education funding like the Constitution says it should?
Well, that depends how you define a predominant amount.
Well, I guess
if you say 50%, I don't think so. I mean, I think as you've seen with expansion of healthcare, you're going to see the state spending an awful lot more on healthcare in the state, and so it's going to be very difficult as healthcare costs have grown fairly significantly. I think hopefully we'll be containing some of those costs growth going forward, but it's going to be difficult to get enough money for education in the near future. I think it is a goal. I think it's something we should work towards, but I don't expect it in the next few years.
How do you feel about term limits?
I've been opposed to term limits. I think that I've served with lots of colleagues who bring a great amount of experience to the job. And for my colleagues who have perhaps been there too long and gotten complacent, we have elections every 2 to 4 years where those people can be removed. I don't know where my opponent is, but I know where he was. He believed we needed term limits on legislative leaders. And when he became the leader of his caucus, he said he would abide by term limits until he changed his mind, until he got in there. What I don't support is inconsistencies. Term limits for you, but not term limits for me.
And I believe we talked about medical marijuana or marijuana legalization.
Oh, no, not in this room.
No, not in this room right now. Thoughts on legalizing marijuana in Illinois?
No, it's not something I'm prepared to support. I supported medical marijuana. So I talked to an awful lot of people who felt that it was the only way they could really stop and alleviate some of their suffering and allow them to continue to eat at various times. And I think we put some strong controls in place so this doesn't grow to the point where what we see in California.
Outright legalization?
No, I not support that.
Okay.
Would you say that on the quad at U of I?
Sure.
Oh, there's the time.
Okay.
Would you like to say, is there anything we didn't touch on? Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about, to share with us?
No, I think, I think what we need to do is you have someone with experience to come in and bring some integrity to this office so we can start making wise investments. And that's it. We shouldn't be growing this office. We shouldn't be taking on new responsibilities. I'll reiterate, though, that if the only tool in your belt is a hammer, the world problems all seem to resemble nails. I don't think that we can sue our way into prosperity in the state. I don't think that lawsuits are the way to grow our economy. I think there's a very fundamental disagreement of how this office should be run. I think we should take what we're doing and be smarter about how we do it, rather than taking on new responsibilities, hiring new people, and yet at the same time promising to reduce the size of the office. I think that if we make smart investments, greater investments, greater promotion of investments in agriculture in the state and our tech companies in the state, we make great investments in our small business people and our entrepreneurs in the state. Not only can the state get a good return on its investment, we have the added dividends of growing companies here in the state and hiring more people here. And if we do that, the Treasury's not going to grow the economy all by themselves. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't start working on it. You know, sometimes I tell people that if you think of us, we're all in this together, all citizens of the state. We're all piled onto one bus, and we want to be moving forward. Okay? We want to be going in a direction together. Well, that bus has gotten a little bit off of the road. We might be in the ditch here. It does no good to hop off the bus and point and say, I wasn't the driver. Look, they're the driver. They're responsible for all this. We're all on this, and if we're going to get out, we've all got to get off and put a shoulder to help move us out of the ditch. As treasurer, I can't do it all by myself, but that doesn't mean we're not going to start working it. So we're going to make these investments to grow our economy, because if we can help grow more jobs here in the state, you have more families, people that can support their families themselves, which reduce the amount the state has to pay out. And if you got more people working, more income, there's more money they're paying in to our state. That helps us ultimately with our budget problems. That's what I'm committed to doing. I'm not looking to run for higher office. I'm not looking to use the stepping stone to run for Attorney General. I'm running for state treasurer because I've been a county auditor. I'm a certified public finance officer, and I think these are important things we need to bring to the office, and that's why I've been running for this office and not something else.